Hello, everybody, and welcome to Multifamily Chronicles, my podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Danila. My guest today is Paul Rhodes. Paul is the Director of Maintenance Operations with Life Properties. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hey, Adrian. Thanks for having me.
So, Paul, for the two people that don't know you yet in our industry, right? Please introduce yourself to the couple of them that are out there, and hopefully they will be watching this episode. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background.
You got it, Adrian. As you mentioned, my name is Paul Rhodes. I'm currently the Director of Maintenance Operations with the Life Properties. Before that, and I guess my claim to fame, if it were fame, is I was the National Maintenance Instructor for the National Apartment Association Education Institute, to where I spent 9.5 years traveling around the country working alongside the National Apartment Association, teaching maintenance guys and gals skills to do the job. Before that, I ran the training department for HD Supply. Wrote and developed a lot of the training that it's my understanding they still use some of it today. And before that, going even further back, I ran maintenance on multiple properties here in the Atlanta area, and started out way back in 1996 or 97 as a groundskeeper, what we would commonly today call a porter or a groundsman on property right here in Roswell, Georgia. So I've been in the apartment industry for roughly 26 years now, and have held every maintenance position, including a contractor, to where I at one point spent a year building and remodeling swimming pools in both residential and for apartment communities. So by way of a background, it's a very varied and diverse background that I've done my best to have a great time with in every position that I happen to hold.
That's one of the reasons why I want you to come on the show, because there's just so much for our audience to hear from you. And I wanted to start with the first topic of our conversation.
Sure.
It's well known by everybody out there, not just in our industry, as the Great Resignation, right? A lot of the employees are seeing that there's a lot of opportunities out there, and they're considering leaving their current jobs, going for better opportunities, better paid opportunities, advancement, career advancement. I like to start with, how did this whole thing start? How did we get here? And then, and then where are we heading? And how do we manage as an industry?
Wow. Okay, so we've got about 14 hours to cover. How did we get here? And then we'll spend a couple years figuring out where we're at. How we got here, I'm actually not sure. And to be honest, the how we got here, I'm personally, and as a leader, I'm only interested in how we got here enough to figure out a prescription to not do it again. And by that, I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, so I don't have the magic answer. I do think to some extent a cultural shift in the entire country is partially to blame, with COVID and the pandemic that now is turning endemic. It caused a lot of us to refocus and shift where our career priorities are and what we need to do. There also, in addition to the career priorities, there is a change in the job, just the physical tasks that maintenance technicians ended up having to do. I mean, I'm an example of that in that the pandemic started in things really shut down in March of 2020. And instantly I went from having 9 months of scheduled training, where I was traveling around the country and doing CAMT, the training for the Certificate for Apartment Maintenance Technician class. And I was pre-scheduled out 9 months full of classes. And when the shutdown occurred, overnight, every class was canceled. No lie, within 2 days, every apartment association, every class that I had on the books was canceled. Well, my job description was, Paul, you go somewhere and you stand up in front of a group of people. Well, now you can't stand in front of a group of people. So that tells me that, okay, I've got to change something in my job, in my career. And I ended up looking and finding a fantastic company to come work for, and in a position that I changed my career path. It's related, but it was a different change in a career. Well, how much of this in the maintenance industry, how much of what we're experiencing is a result of that? I mean, our properties went through, if we think of the timeline from March, just to round it off, March of 2020 until realistically, I think it was May or June of 2021 that the vaccines got rolled out and everybody kind of began relaxing access into our residents' apartments. Well, suddenly we went for almost overnight having a structured preventive maintenance plan. Up until March of 2020, most properties and the organized properties, the communities would have maintenance being performed in that apartment at least twice a year, changing air conditioning filters, smoke detectors, all of those normal things. Well, instantly in March 2020, that's it. You can't go into your residence apartment. And that continued for a year of the majority of our communities. We did no preventive maintenance. Well, what's the byproduct of that? What is the unintended consequence of that? Well, now we have work orders that we, in a sense, we told our residents, we don't want your work order because we're not coming in to fix it because pandemic, because the germ, because of COVID. Now, right, wrong, or indifferent, the end result and all of the fear that this stoked and justified, but the reality is we've got apartments that today, how many of our communities, a maintenance technician has still not been in that apartment? And I'm not just talking about your management company or my management company, across the country, apartments. So the reason why I went into that depth or that long timeline, what today has changed about the job or the role of an apartment maintenance technician that was not the way it was a year ago. So that aspect of the Great Resignation is one thing to consider. A second thing to consider is how many of our older or more senior maintenance technicians, people with legacy knowledge, that when their families came home, when the kids couldn't go back to school and somebody needed to watch the kids, how many of our maintenance technicians are older, in their late 50s and 60s from an aging standpoint, and how many of them have essentially retired? And those vacated places have not been filled. As a wide industry, is that an area or is that an aspect that we're actively seeking? I don't have an answer to that. This morning, as a matter of fact, there was an article I was reading that talked about the fact that from the age group of all of labor, and if I remember right, this came from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there was a 3% drop in employees in the 55 and up category, meaning a year ago, there were more people 55 and up in the workforce. And now there's a 3% drop. Well, 3% doesn't seem like much until you spread it over the millions of people in that age category that a year ago were working and now have taken early retirement. The reality is that the apartment maintenance industry, the median age for being a maintenance worker in multifamily, and actually across all the trades, the median age for all of that has been gradually increasing higher and higher. So my question is then, if all of that is taken into account, how do we solve it? Meaning, what can we do? I mean, I know you spoke here a couple of weeks ago with Sarah Thompson, our recruiter, internal recruiter, and she has a brain for that sort of thing. My giftings are not in finding candidates. Mine, I would like to believe that my giftings are what I tend to do is develop people once they're already here. But speaking with her, what can we do about attracting those to our industry and by extension to other trades that we call on? This isn't just an issue with being an apartment maintenance technician. It's an issue for the electricians, for the general contractors, for drywall, for painting, for all of those other trades that we need to use to support our industry, especially with our aging buildings and all the deferred maintenance that has occurred because we haven't been able to get into these apartments. So I don't know that I have a magic bullet answer, but those are the topics that are on the top of my mind right now as far as how to deal with the Great Resignation, and hopefully come up with some ideas of getting beyond it or getting past it.
So you brought several, very interesting and, very solid points, right? One is COVID, like pre-COVID and after COVID, or like post-COVID, right?
Yeah.
I would say, even though we're not post, that's not behind us, but pre-COVID and then life after COVID, right? Mm-hmm. It's people are really seeing their priorities, shifting, and they're not. Although before this was just work, like that was the number one thing that most people were thinking about, like were focusing on. Mm-hmm. Most of the time during the work week, I'll say. Now I think that we're pausing a lot more and we're thinking, hey, is this right for me? Is this right for my family? It's a shift in on-scene priorities necessary, but in the way we see the priorities, because although everybody needs to provide, most people need to provide, it's still something that we have to do, and that's what we do is going to work producing, but then at the same time we're looking for ways to find more time to spend with our loved ones, and it's a very unfortunate thing that COVID really cut those relationships very short. A lot of people lost a lot of very they lost loved ones, right? And that's a very tragic thing, and that's just something that will really shift a person's thinking, right? And their priorities, like they will see their priorities different. We have to realize that, and I think that happened a lot, even though there were maybe not individuals that were directly affected, but they had friends, very close friends or family that went through this tragedy. And as a consequence, they're really approaching work-life balance a totally different way. I'll say almost like the opposite than what the way they used to. Another great point that you brought is the aging of the workforce, right? And we as an industry, and I think other industries too, had hard time attracting new blood. Mm-hmm. having, hey, how do we attract younger generations to come and embrace the trades? You could make a great living. You use your personal example, right? You start as a groundskeeper. So did I. And I spoke with Mark Kukro a couple of weeks ago. He's one of the very well-known trainers in the industry. Yeah. Just like you, he started the same way as a groundskeeper. So there's so many stories in our industry, especially on the maintenance side, where individuals like us that currently hold maintenance director positions, corporate level positions, we started at the very ground and we work our way up. How do we find individuals, with the drive? How do we get, excuse me, the younger individuals to be interested to actually take this as a career and understand that this is not just a job, like I could make a living, I could really make a career out of it. Like in 15, 20 years, I could become the top person, the top guy in a maintenance department of a maybe large company, 10, 15, 1,000 apartment homes managed. To be the head of maintenance for that, that's a huge deal. I always make this comparison and I say, hey, a service manager, it's someone that manages 60, 70 million dollars at today's price, right? Worth of real estate. A money manager, someone that handles people's retirement money, right? Funds. If they ever get to manage 60, 70 million dollars worth of money, retirement money, they're a very accomplished person, so that's a really, really big deal. I always make this comparison because people might not realize that it's not just overseeing a staff of 4 or 5 or 7 individuals, not just overseeing operation for 3, 4, 500 apartment homes, but it's the value that real estate has, which is a staggering number. It's just a lot of responsibility. And when you multiply that and you say, hey, maintenance director for life properties, you probably have billions of dollars worth of real estate that you oversee. That is not a small thing. That is a huge deal. Of course, you earn it, you work your way up to it, but then it comes with a lot of responsibility. It's a very, very important position in an organization like yours. And there are so many others just like yours. So one of the reasons I think, why people might consider different careers, I think it's really company culture, right? The type of environment that they're part of. How they being treated, how they feel like they're being treated. Paul, do you agree that culture plays an important role into people's decisions of whether they choose property management or they want to go somewhere else?
I don't think so. Because and the reason why I say that is in my mind, it's you're kind of referencing two different things. You've got career and then you've got a company culture. And a career of being a maintenance technician or being a maintenance supervisor or doing or providing maintenance in a real estate environment, that is a career that is transferable from company culture to company culture. You've got the big names and you've got the smaller names. You've got the huge management companies that own and operate their properties. You've got management companies that specialize in third-party management or fee managed. Then you've got the little or smaller mom and pop type organizations that they buy single family homes or they buy a duplex or a fourplex and they rent that out, and it's all rental community. And every one of those situations, you have to have somebody that's going to maintain the building. But in each and every one of those little subdivisions or little organizations, each one of those has a separate culture. And whether I'm going to be a maintenance technician for culture or company A, B, C, or D, or family E, F, and G, that's two different things in my mind. I do agree with you that company culture is huge, but only as much as you're deciding to work for management company A or group B. I think that to back it up to that career level, the job level or the trade level, I think that may be one thing that we haven't quite figured out yet as a industry. And I don't think it's the same, or I think it's the same thing that like carpenters, steam fitters, plumbers, all of the other trades are trying to figure out as well. I tend to think along the lines of Mike Rowe here. Mike Rowe, the host from Dirty Jobs, that he's got the Mike Rowe Works Foundation, that the whole focus is that for a fulfilling life and for a career, if we're going to have a career, then that requires an understanding that you do not have to have a college education to be fulfilled in life, to have a meaningful career, and even a career that can allow you to provide for your family and live a comfortable life. Just to the point of you that you said, being in this industry for over a decade, for over 2 decades, working on, getting to my 3rd decade. This is a fantastic career that I've gotten to meet some of the most wonderful people in, and work as you mentioned, myself, you, Mark Kukro, and others within the organization have worked themselves up by title or by job responsibility, starting at the low of the entry level, low skilled position that we started as. It's a career path that you can take that does not require that education. I just have a high school education. That's it. I have no formal secondary after education at all. I'm a nerd who likes to read an awful lot and find enjoyment in applying whatever I read. And in the process of applying that, I need to figure out more situations and apply those situations, and have been given challenges and a lot of times those challenges I succeed at, not always, but each and every time, even if I didn't make it, I still applied the lesson I learned when I failed and failed forward or moved ahead. And if somebody is looking for a career that gives you the ability to do that, I'm a huge evangelist for being a maintenance technician. I mean, it is the most wonderful thing. I love it. It is great, especially for someone like myself that was a huge fan of comic book superheroes. And I want to be the superhero. I'm just not good enough to be a doctor or a nurse or somebody in our frontline superheroes now. Instead, I'm the superhero for 2 o'clock in the morning when the toilet doesn't plunge. It doesn't clog. I come along with the plunger. I can solve that. This, from a career standpoint, that's it. It is the coolest thing in the world to go out in the middle of the night, solve somebody's problem, and then get a thank you and go home. That, I think, is one of the biggest benefits of our trade, is we get to meaningfully affect people's lives. Now, from a culture standpoint, to separate that out from a career path to a cultural path, working for a management company and the life properties, we have a culture that is focused on core values. And I believe in you guys explored it a little bit when you were talking with Sarah. And a lot of our core values, really, it boils down to the very first one that we have as a company, people first. We specialize in communities that are workforce housing, meaning we're looking for homes where typically the tradespeople would live. We're diversifying a lot more into affordable housing properties, and our goals are to really take some communities that have been, for whatever reason, a little bit neglected, and turn them around. For whatever reason they were in the situation that they are when we get them and take them over. And I've seen properties that when we go there and the playground, kids can't play on the playground safely. It is not a place. And I was at a community here a month ago that being able to see the change of when we got there over a year ago, the playground was broken apart. It was just unsafe. It was fenced off. And now a year later, the just from my visit, it happened faster than that, but a year later, kids are playing on the playground and having a great time, and you see moms and dads watching the kids play. And working for a company and having a company culture that prioritizes that is a huge thing of importance for me. Now, one of the challenges in creating a culture, which may be too broad a term. I'm not even sure that's a good way of describing kind of what we're discussing here. But a part of that, working for a company that prioritizes the residents to the extent that we want to be sure that not only are we making it pretty, not only are we painting the outside and stripping or seal coating the parking lot or putting roofs on, but we're taking care of the playground. We're taking care of a dog park. We're making sure that all of the things that are not as flashy or big as painting the outside of it for our residents. In my mind, that speaks a lot about who the company, who the culture values. I mean, why we want to have our employees. We want to have our employees so that we can serve our residents and treating them that way. Now, having said all those words, I'm not even sure I answered the question you were asking.
Well, I wanted to pick on a word that you used a few times. Meaningful work, right? Well, there's two words, but meaningful, right? This is a word that means a lot to me, especially when it comes to work, because I'm the type of individual that, if I'm in an environment where my work is not meaningful, I don't feel like I belong there. I don't want to be part of that environment. If it's not, and I think a lot of people feel this way, right? So I want to tie meaningful to something else that goes way back into your background, training. And I'd like to ask you, what does meaningful training look like in 2021? Ideally, what would be the ideal type of training that you'll see for maintenance professionals in 2021 or 2022, because it's almost 2022, in apartment industry? What type of training is really the type of training that would really touch, will really do the job, will really work for individuals, will be meaningful, right?
I think if we're going to continue on the theme of a important word or a key word for that, to summarize the training that's needed is applicable. In other words, if I have a group of individuals in front of me that I'm providing training for, whatever I'm going to talk about with this group of individuals, it needs to be able to be applied. And a case in point of that is the EPA certification. EPA 608 certification is a required certificate that maintenance technicians need to have in order to purchase and use refrigerants. And yes, HFCs and HCFCs and all of those global warming and climate change and all of those buzzwords are important. And the certification is absolutely critical in order for an apartment maintenance technician to be able to do his job. It's required. But the challenge comes when you ask the question, how applicable is passing this test to doing the job of being an apartment maintenance technician today? How applicable? On one sense, it's a very applicable thing, because in order to perform refrigerant repairs, you have to have the certification. On the other sense, it's not very applicable at all, because in order to pass the test, you don't have to know how to do anything. All you have to know is how to memorize a study guide, memorize a book, and pass a test. And if you pass that test, you don't have to know how to do anything. I mean, you pass that test, you don't know how the steps to recover refrigerant or to charge a machine. You know the words, but how it applies. So from a meaningful standpoint, the training that we do for apartments, it needs to apply. And more than just the technical knowledge. I mean, right now, because of changes that we've had for our industry, for all the trades, of the aging out of the workforce and all of those various things, right now at your management company, Adrian, the one you're working for, my guess is, and a lot of the audience as well, if you work for a management company and you're in a leadership role, my question for you is, how many maintenance supervisors that you have with that title right now today, how many of those maintenance supervisors actually have the skill necessary to supervise a maintenance team, versus how many of them are in their role because they've lasted longer than anybody else at the property?
That's a wonderful question, Paul. And I will really hope that we could do a second episode, you and I, because what we did so far is to barely scratch the surface of what I wanna discuss with you, right?
Sure.
And I will love to continue if you would
Yeah.
if you would give me the time to to meet for a second, because it's absolutely fascinating to me, and I think that there's a lot to be said. And again, we haven't even started yet, really.
Oh, I know it.
We haven't even started yet. So with that being said, I don't want to say in closing, I wanted to say, I want you to just say something in closing of this episode that will get us started for the next one, for the audience. Because if I'm gonna ask you what something we didn't cover, we didn't cover most of what I wanted to cover. But it's been a fascinating conversation, and I really want to keep this going because I think there's just so much value in it. I don't want to go through 5 or 7 or 13 topics and said we cover so much when you have so much to offer, so so much input on on all of those topics. I don't want to rush through them. I rather, if you could make the time and you want to come back, that we do a second, third episode, and we keep going that way. So what would be a segue into our next episode, Paul?
Sure, and I'm very happy for this to be part A or one, and continue forward. And really, kind of in closing for this one, it would be to finalize or find a stopping point for what we were just talking about, of meaningful training and how it applies. And where I think we need to be realistic about is that, yes, we need training. in order for it to apply, we can't just cover the nuts and bolts, the where to use a Phillips head screwdriver, where to use a flathead screwdriver, how to make this individual repair. We also need to cover how to do the job, be in the role. And by that, I mean, if we've got maintenance supervisors who don't know how to be maintenance supervisors, we need to focus less than on how to perform superheat and subcool in a split system air conditioning, and focus a little bit more on, hey, this is your budget. Your budget's broken down into these general ledger categories, these GL codes, HVAC, air conditioning, electrical, and based on that amount of money, what can you do today to decrease the spend so that if you need to increase it later? You know, those leadership type questions. So much of training, we focus on the nuts and bolts, and we forget to put it into that applicable box or that applicable place. And if audience, you tune in for the next time, maybe we'll get into where that goes, but happy to share anything at any time.
Paul, it's been a real pleasure to have you on. Again, 2-3 hours wouldn't be enough to, you know, to even get close to what we have to cover. I love the conversation. I love the spirit of the conversation. I hope to have you back soon. Again, thank you very much. Thank you very much for accepting to come. And thank you everybody for watching us. This is Adrian Danila, I'm your host, and this is Multifamily Chronicles, and this is episode number 8. I hope to see you back here soon.